Gordon Stables. In addition to being a communication professor here, I'm also the Assistant Dean for Student Affairs. And at Annenberg, Student Affairs involves a number of programs, including career development and career services, which for us is a big point of emphasis and a big point of pride. And in that part, before we get started, I do need to thank the public affairs and career development teams who put this event together and organized it. They're running around in the back, but thank them all for really making this an event possible. The idea for this comes from our dean. And his vision, and the reason why he's given us the Dean's Forum space today, is the notion and thinking about what he describes as third space. But I think for most people in the room, we're describing it as what's the relationship between education and the skills that you need to succeed in the workforce, and in a dramatically changing workforce and in a dramatically changing environment. So there's a couple of ways to think about why we're here today and how this relates. All of the panelists are alumni of the Annenberg School and recent alumni. They've graduated within the last few years, and they reflect some of the broader groups of alums that we're very proud of. We're proud in a number of areas that make Annenberg a very distinct area. So for instance, last year we're able to confirm that our freshman graduation rate after 4 years is 91% at the end of 4 years, which is pretty good, especially when you consider schools like Harvard and Yale and Princeton are below that for their 4-year freshman graduation rate. So we start with the premise that the expectation as an undergraduate you spend 4 years. For one of our 9 graduate programs, you have also a fixed duration of time. But at the end of that, that you leave with the opportunity to be working. And for everyone who's a current student in the room, you realize that that leaving and working part is probably something you're already familiar with. The average Annenberg student does a number of internships while they're here, and in fact, our panelists today will talk a little bit about the experiences they had while working as a student and then working afterward. But then afterward, we're very proud of what's that relationship between how you're positioned to succeed in your different fields and what position to be involved in that way. And so, for instance, last year, the career development team for Annenberg surveyed every Annenberg alumni who's graduated since 2008. That is, since the economic recession. We wanted to ask the very concrete question, how are you doing? And we looked up and said that 85% of the respondents felt that they were making good progress towards their career goals. 86% reported they were employed in fields that they were enjoying. And 78% said that they were either very satisfied or satisfied with their work. We started to get a little bit of a sense of where we are. Now, until those numbers are 100%, we all think we have room to grow, but we're also reflective of the interaction between what you get here and what's on the outside. So before I turn it over to our panelists, the thing I'd ask about is when our dean talks about third space, he's asking about what are the traits that maybe 5 or 10 or 15 years ago didn't necessarily show up in your curriculum as something that you were asked to think about. But if you were to say something today about adaptability, or the ability to do what they reference as 360-degree thinking, or the ability to see the problems coming and not say, well, I have a public relations degree, so I can't do civic engagement, or I have a communication degree, so I can't do content production. Our interest today is talking to these panelists about what the ways that these evolving competencies are relevant in their life, in their fields, and the kinds of things that they're doing. So with that, I want to briefly introduce and then ask our panelists to talk a little bit more about themselves. Immediately to my left, we've got Jordan Schmidt, who works for public affairs at Riot Games, and he's a graduate of our communication management degree in 2013. So welcome, Jordan. Thank you for being here. You can also applaud. Thank you for being here. Or not. Then to his left immediately, we have Jamie Kim, who is a global brand and marketing associate at Disney Interactive, and she's a 2013 graduate of our undergraduate communication program. And then on the screen, we've brought in an alum from our 2010 broadcast journalism cohort. Ashley Chang and this is in some ways a sponsored appearance. Ashley is an employee of Google Docs at Google, who is working with us on Google Hangouts today from their offices in New York. So thanks for being here, Ashley.
Of course, a lot of Google in one sentence.
That's certainly okay. So what I wanted to start with is the question that probably motivated most of you to be here, which is what are they doing and how did they get from where they were when they were sitting in the classroom at the old Annenberg building? We've been talking about the opportunities in the new one today. So we'll just start a little bit about what do you remember about being here as a student and how has that kind of led your transition into your current role? So, Jordan.
So starting here, am I close enough? Oh, there we go. I can hear myself now. So starting here as a student, one of the things that I made sure I did when I got here was I wanted to make the degree about myself, and so I worked really closely with Dr. Shipley. to study everything that I wanted to study, and that was video games. Only video games. I was like, I'm going to apply everything I can in communication to video games. So what I did was I created a curriculum for my master's around studying the communication online in video games or communication online in communities. And so I wanted to apply that to working in video games somehow. And eventually, while I was here, I went to PAX. I don't know how many of you have been there, Penny Arcade Expo. It's a video game conference. And I walked up to Riot Games and said, I'm getting my master's in communication online, and I'd like an internship. And so started an internship while I was here, and worked through that internship while studying here, and then ended up there after I graduated.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, you're really close.
So I think really being here for 4 years, I picked up 4 main things: to be a critical thinker, an effective communicator, and being collaborative, and also just being open-minded to anything. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know what age range is in this group, but when you first enter college, you think you know what you want to do, but it's not until you actually enter the classroom and apply to certain internships you pick up really what you want to do and what story you want to tell while being in the class or being at a workplace, etc. So I think really I learned just even from simple courses, just the art of being a great speaker or just being open-minded and just really thinking, being a critical thinker behind, writing a simple essay or writing a big term paper, etc. So I think while you're in those courses, for me, I really learned from these courses, what do I really want to convey to an employer or an employee? Like, what kind of story do I want to tell, from my undergraduate courses to applying in the work field? So I think that really, for me, it was being in entertainment, and specifically children's entertainment was what I really wanted to get into. And I think there could be a personal story behind it or just really your brand affinity for a company. I think for me, it was a mix of both. So really, I think what I got out of the 4 years was just integrating the two, my personal interests plus a personal story behind everything. So the 4 things, and just being able to identify yourself.
Great, thanks. Ashley?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Right on, if you can hear me. Okay, great. So as Professor Stables mentioned, I was in your shoes about roughly 5 years ago. And it's definitely fast how time flies, and it's been an amazing 5 years. Let me just give you a quick preview of what I've been doing, and maybe that'll help you understand the importance of adaptability, and I think a lot about what this talk is about. So 5 years ago, sitting in your shoes, I applied to Google right out of school, and I started in our sales department. I worked with our large customers for about 2 years in terms of sales. And then I switched over to the marketing department and worked in London and Paris on what we call the Google Cultural Institute, which is this awesome governing body that is responsible for projects like the Google Art Project. If you haven't seen that, Google it. It's really amazing. So I spent some time working out there on a completely different project than what I did before. So I was in London and Paris, then I came back and worked on Google Wallet and Android Pay in terms of marketing. And then most recently, I switched to Google Docs in the marketing team, and I specifically work on product launches. And the reason why I'm telling you all of this is in the last 5 or so years, there was a lot of different projects that I've kind of come on and come off. And I've learned a lot every piece of the way. And I think the biggest takeaway is I have no idea, specifically what project I'm going to be working on 5 years from now. But what I do know is that it's really important to kind of always be inquisitive, always look for what you're passionate about, kind of go out there and figure out what is it that you can do, what are the new exciting projects you want to work on, but most importantly, how can you make sure that you are kind of talking about yourself in a very adaptable way. I'm not one person that, kind of fits in one shoebox and only does marketing or only does sales or only does XYZ. I think especially in today's world, especially in an industry that I'm in, which is tech, things are always changing. There's always opportunities. It's kind of up to you to show the people around you that you have a can-do attitude and that you're flexible and willing to take on things, even if you honestly have no idea what you're doing. You'll pick it up.
Well, that's a good transition, and I think that's part of what we wanted. And even for the panelists that were sick and had to cancel this morning, we intentionally wanted to find folks that worked at large organizations and brands that you might be familiar with, but we wanted them to talk a little bit about what's beyond that. So you know a name like Google, you might have played, Riot Games does, or you might have been involved in thinking about maybe you've heard of was it Disney and the companies? Maybe you've got some brand familiarity. So I'm now going to ask our panelists a little bit more, what is different about the organizational culture or the different kinds of settings and experiences they've had. So when they go beyond the name, when you hear the name Disney or when you hear the name Riot Games or you hear the name Google, what's different from being on that other side, and how does that curiosity help you navigate that bigger environment, that bigger platform?
So speaking to the adaptability, I started Riot Games as an intern, and I worked on a bunch of different things that interns would typically work on. So data entry, a few different projects here and there, taking a look at some large analytical software, stuff like that. And that's stuff they entrusted to an intern, which was pretty awesome. But from the internship, I actually moved to a different role, which was a programs designer. I don't really know that much about programs design. I am not a designer by trade. I didn't study design, but I said, yeah, I'll take that. I'll see what I can do. And what they wanted me to do was actually work on using my communication skills and building programs that would bring players together outside the game. So we wanted to create parties where players would watch Worlds together for the championship game, or they wanted to create events where players would create tournaments and play together in person, rather than just having the online component of communication. So they brought me on and they said, we need you to adapt to being a designer. We need you to create something interesting here. And so speaking to the competencies, the intellectual curiosity, I wanted to try it. I said, why don't I attack this space? I don't know much about it, but I'm going to jump into it and see what I can do. Moving from there, I actually moved into player relations, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's talking to players or relating with players. And in that position, completely different. I wasn't designing any systems at all. In fact, my job was to be an empath. I was supposed to know what players were thinking all the time. I was supposed to understand how players were going to take messaging, how a change might impact them. And so what I needed to do was I needed to work with tech teams. I needed to work with our champion design teams, or any internal team for that matter, that was creating a product that would touch players. And I needed to understand, how are players going to think about this? So I had to take my designer hat off, and I had to think, okay, as a player, what am I going to take away from this? Or what message am I going to receive when I hear about this change? And so I had to move from being a designer into, I'm no longer a designer, and now I'm creating messaging or helping teams contextualize things for players and understanding how they think. And then moved into public affairs, which is finding gaps in our organizational kind of brand and promises and what we believe and our actions, and trying to fix those or trying to address those. So now I'm not only dealing with players, but I'm having to adapt to, we have advocacy groups, we have regulatory authorities, we have nonprofits that we want to work with. So trying to find different spaces where we're able to be empathetic and understand what other people outside of our organization are thinking, so that we can be successful both with them and on our own.
Okay. Jamie?
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, for me as well, I think adaptability is another thing, and just being open-minded. So I actually started off as an intern as well at Disney Interactive, and like Jordan here, I was in a completely different role. What I signed on for originally was being on the web production and a brand management side of things. So essentially, in a nutshell, managing the online presence for the Mickey Mouse brand, for Radio Disney, et cetera. So these different teams actually. So for a year, that was the role that I was assigned to, and just by networking and by having coffees and just, being hungry and curious to learn and want more, I actually got brought on to another different team. Currently my role with the global brand management team for a Toy to Live category video game called Disney Infinity. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the game, but that's the game that I'm currently on the brand management side of. So going from something like a production role and just, being very CMS driven and learning how to use different web tools, to actually owning a product, a physical toy. And currently my responsibilities are really with retail marketing strategy, international marketing, same with asset creation for different campaigns, and also our digital media campaign. So again, a lot of these things just came on to me when I transitioned into a full-time role. And again, I think that for me, I think the really big thing was staying hungry and wanting to learn more and go outside of my comfort zone and just, wanting to absorb as much knowledge as I can. And I think really that's what a lot of employers saw out of me, me wanting to really learn and, not being stuck in the same mundane role, but really being willing to do a lot of different types of responsibilities and roles. So I think really, I think even at a larger corporation, you might think that, oh, I don't know if I've never done this kind of job before. I don't think I can take it on, or they will never look at me. But I think if you show that curiosity, any employer, any large corporation will really look at you. And working with a great boss is a really big, I think it's the biggest impact you have, just because, you're there, you're at your workplace way more than you're with your families and with your friends. So I think that because if you have a good leader, a good boss, you want to work harder. So I think that by being open-minded, being with a good team, staying hungry, and back to what our friend over here was saying, that, things are changing. Technology is just ever growing, and I think that by going with the trends and just researching and constantly reading up on articles, et cetera, I think that's really critical just to your next transition in life. So, yeah.
Great. Ashley?
Sure. Here at Google, a mantra called launch and iterate. It kind of means you just do things and you get it out there and then you fix as you go. And I think that same mentality is pretty applicable to many people's experiences when they start at Google, perhaps at some of as well. Take, for example, when I started right after school, right after the summer, we had a little bit of, and then they told us, look, you're going to manage a book of business. Oh, by the way, you're going to be managing clients that spend more than $5 million with Google a quarter. And you are going to be the expert and tell them what to do. And I remember sitting there like, what? Like, first of all, like prior to reading about interviewing, I didn't know about any of this. And I surely don't know how to use the product. And I surely don't know how to advise these big businesses on like what to do with their money. The good thing is you usually are around a group of people that know more than you and have perhaps more experience. And you can kind of love support, as well as giving yourself the confidence to say, look, I might not get it perfectly right the first time, but that's okay. I'm going to go. You'll find that leader after me was really easy, and I was on to the next challenge. So definitely, regardless of your specific role description, and regardless of what you're actually doing, I found that there's perhaps three main truths to be true. One is that no matter what you're doing, whether I'm on a video, product launch strategy, working with agencies, managing our social channels, writing keynotes, no matter what the project is, number one is collaboration. There's a lot of people that can help you, and usually collaboration allows you to create a product or an end result that's better than what you can do on your own. Number two is communication. And that I say is probably fits in very well with collaboration, right? So communication is important because you need to be able to work with these people, and you need to be able to do it in a very concise and efficient manner. So whether that's writing emails or working face-to-face or over Hangouts like this, how can you continue to perfect your communication skills using what you learn at Annenberg or with your extracurricular activities? What can you do to make sure you are an extremely effective communicator so that you can not only work with people, but persuade them to do bigger and better things?
Fantastic.
And then I think the last piece is saying yes. This is one of my favorite things that Eric Schmidt, our chairman, has said. I'll read you part of his quote. Basically, he says, find a way to say yes to things. Say yes to invitations to new country. Say yes to meeting new friends. Say yes to learning something new. Yes is how you get your first job and your next job, your spouse, and even your kids. Even if it's a bit edgy, a bit out of your comfort zone, saying yes means that you will do something new, meet someone new, and make a difference. Yes lets you stand out in a crowd, be the optimist, be the glass full, and be the one everyone comes to. Yes is what keeps us all young. So those are my three: collaboration, communication, and just say yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, that's great, and that's a perfect segue into saying yes. Part of what we wanted a younger group of alumni is because we wanted to transition and say, you're thinking about what's that first job, that next job immediately after you graduate. Now let's have the question posed to them a little bit in terms of they've accomplished, things are going well, they're working at large established organizations. What are the choices and decisions that they're facing next? So the question for each of you, what do you see as that career goal or trajectory, and what are some of those choices and some of the things that you might have to say yes or no to in the next immediate future for each of you?
Sure. So with public affairs right now, Riot Games is an LA-centered company. We're headquartered in Los Angeles, and most of our employees are in Los Angeles. Though we do have offices all around the world. We have 17 offices in 17 different countries. And currently, my role for public affairs is dealing with typically local government or advocacy groups or people in LA or Western United States. And I want to grow in 2016. My goal is to grow it to all 17 offices. So in 17 different countries, I want to be doing public affairs work. I want to be working with advocacy groups all around the world. I want to be working with regulatory authorities and nonprofit groups all around the world. And that's going to require saying yes and not really knowing exactly what I'm doing and stepping into a new space. And then the second major area that I want to add to is I have a major passion for education, both for teaching and for learning. And I want to find a way to bring education, not necessarily League of Legends, but bring it onto Riot's radar. Find a way to create educational opportunities for whether it's STEM, whether it's understanding how games can impact people positively, finding ways to really bring education into how Riot works.
Yeah, so actually going off of Jordan, so my passion actually as well as being within the children's entertainment space is to really be an advocate for autism. And I think that video games and gaming in general in this time is really a great way to create that interactive space for kids with disabilities, with special needs. And for me, that's always been where my heart is. And I think that's what attributes to me wanting to be within this space. So I think that a lot of folks don't really know much about the issues with autism or they simply just don't know. So I think that by being that advocate and really through simple actions, just through conversation, I think for me, that's really where my heart has been. So we actually at the Walt Disney Company have a corporate citizenship group, and Disney Infinity is sort of a big impact actually, or starting to become a big role in being part of that corporate citizenship volunteering environment. And like Jordan says, it involves a lot of saying yeses to certain tasks and certain things you just, you may not want to do or you just may not want to be a part of. But again, I think to get to your end goal, there's always that need to strive for whatever task you're given. And I think that it's a way for you to learn something new. And I think that really by saying yes to your superiors or even to an intern and being collaborative with them is really, really the key to your growth in the long term. And I think that you always want to be nice to people. You might be having a bad day or you just may not be in the best mood, but I think that really you really want to make a big, even through simple conversations, it can make an impact on that person you could be working for or currently working with. So yeah.
Fantastic. Ashley, what kind of choices, what kinds of saying yes are in front of you?
Well, a big choice for me is always trying to figure out what to eat at lunch every day, but I think we're talking more long term. I would say, as a marketer at Google, there's a lot of different products you can work on, and there's a lot of different roles within those products. So one choice that I will have to make in the next maybe year or two is figuring out, if I do choose to stay in marketing, is there another product that I'm interested in working on? Is it a product that's relatively new, maybe something that nobody knows about yet? Or is it, should I go to another big product like Google Play or Gmail and kind of work on them? I'm always trying to learn as much as I can and be a sponge that soaks everything up. There's so many opportunities to learn from people. And I think one of the best parts about being in a marketing role is being able to sit at the cross section of a lot of different teams. So I'm not just doing marketing, but I'm working with everyone from the engineering teams, the product teams, the UX teams, legal, PR, in sales, and trying to figure out what's the next best decisions for our group. So a big piece of that for me is making the choice to, try and learn more about what each of those people at the round table does. How can I make sure that I'm diversifying my skills and my assets? So eventually later down the road, if I decide I don't want to just work in marketing, or if I want to go and potentially start a business or work in a more generalist management role, then hopefully by then we'll have made the choice to learn about different types of roles or to learn about a particularly in-depth part of marketing. So I'm not like kind of pigeonholing myself, and then I'm able to find new opportunities.
That's a great transition to this question, and I like the way you diversified skills. We have some common backgrounds. I know folks are involved in different degree programs here, but there's some commonalities that we're looking at. For each of you, what are some of the skills that you see successful people within your organizations embracing? We have a person we contract with for our international programs in London, and when she meets with students, one of her big credos is skills, not sector. And she says, instead of focusing on the noun of the company you want to work with, so even if you don't necessarily think that Google or Disney or Riot Games is in your future, what are the skills that you see that successful or accomplished people within your organizations displaying?
So I would start with the ability, adaptability is I think number one, and it's being a T-shaped expert. That's kind of the phrase that we use at Riot. It's being able to understand a bunch of different areas, being able to, like you were saying, work with PR, work with marketing, work with brand management, work with design or tech, whoever else, but also have your expertise. You're all getting expertise here. You're all learning a lot, and you're probably delving pretty deep into whatever area of communication you're studying. But the ability to also sponge up the rest of who you're working with and find out how do they do their jobs? How do their jobs work? How do their jobs impact what everything happens all day long, right? How do they impact operations? How do they impact marketing or brand management? So the ability to adapt. I would also say empathy, being able to put yourself in other people's shoes, being able to understand what they're thinking or why they're thinking what they're thinking. And that is, I think, a combination of a few different things. That would be collaboration, that would be communication, that would be the ability to step outside of yourself. I think that's incredibly important, because if you go into a meeting or you go into a pitch and you don't understand how the other people are thinking, you're not going to do a very good job. You need to understand what everyone wants to hear, how they want to hear it, that they're going to best take away the message that you're trying to send. Right? You're not trying to pander to them, but you're trying to send a meaningful message to them. And so for us at Riot, it's about understanding players. Right? We need to be empathetic to players. So how are players going to take away messages? How are players going to take away whatever we're creating? We need to understand that. So I think empathy is a huge one, and I think adaptability, or the ability to be that T-shaped expert.
Yeah. Essentially, everything Jordan said is all true, and I think that the same applies for all three of us. I think to just jump off of him, though, being culturally aware of what's going on around the world, I think it's a very important factor, especially if you're in the international marketing space. A lot of different countries and nations, they function differently, and I think that by understanding their needs and how their markets work, and it all comes back to the North America side of things with the U.S. side of things. So I think by being understanding and really a great listener, I think another thing to add is to be a great listener to the person you're speaking with. A lot of people override that idea, but I think that active listening is a big part of being successful in any organization. Again, if you were to step in a meeting and you weren't paying attention and you were just on your computer the entire time, and if someone turns to you and asks a question, it's pretty embarrassing if you don't know what the topic of discussion was or what the meeting was about. So I think that even if it's the smallest things, being a good listener and actually being genuinely caring, back to the empathy aspect, caring about the other person with what contributions they're making to a meeting, I think that's another thing to add. And I think the biggest thing for me really is passion. Be passionate about what you're doing. You could be in any job in any large corporation, and if you don't have the desire to want to better that product, or you have a heart for what you're doing, it's going to be a very, very challenging life after. So I think that for now, I think it's really best for everyone to really see what am I really passionate about, what makes me want to go work for X, Y, and Z. So yeah.
Fantastic. Ashley?
Sure, I definitely agree. All of the above. Of course, there's the normal ones like communication and whatnot that just allow you to do well at work. I think some things that can really help you stand out is we all got to do stuff every day. There's a lot of things on our long, long to-do list. But if you can spend, I don't know, an hour a week even thinking about stuff that's not on your list, like how do you look at the future, whether it's the next week or the next year or the next 5 years. And if you can kind of understand how can I make tweaks now to better inform the company or do things better, like further out, I think that will truly set you apart from everyone else who's just figuring it out and doing what you have to do that day. And I would say like maybe it seems a little bit silly, but honestly, like if you're a pleasant person, like I really think that helps. You have to be able to work well with people, and I would say don't be afraid to kind of bring yourself to work and really show your teammates who you are. I mean, people are people, and people will work with people that they like. They will hire people that they like. And I think at the end of the day, it's all about being a really solid team and being able to show up to work however you are in your own full self and being a nice, pleasant person to work with and a fun teammate. I think that's not stressed nearly enough, but is something we work with every day. I think that's probably one of the most important things.
As someone that has to make hiring decisions, thank you very much for that last comment. It is certainly something that's true. Well, we want to reserve a little bit of time for questions from the audience, but I have one more way to kind of change the conversation a little bit. You're all recently have been students here and now on the other side of it. So we want you to imagine a little bit that you have the chance to go back in time and talk to the version of yourself that was here, whether that's a year ago, 2 years ago, up to 5 years ago. What was the one thing that you would tell your younger self to really enjoy or to appreciate? And what's maybe one piece of advice that you tell your younger self to maybe think about differently or experience differently, or something you might nudge them a little bit about?
For the enjoyment, I would say you are being taught by some incredibly smart people. And so enjoy those classes. Take time, take those professors out to coffee, talk to them, really soak up everything they have to say because they're very, very, very smart. Brad Shipley, he did a lot for me, and I learned so much from spending time with him outside the classroom and making sure that I wasn't on my phone or computer or whatever inside the classroom. And then the thing that I would suggest, the biggest piece of advice is find what you really care about. For me, obviously it was video games. It's pretty lame, but a lot of people told me, hey, maybe don't go do video games. Right? My whole family was like, don't do that. And I said, no, I'm going to do it. I really like video games, so I'm going to do it. I was passionate about it. So really find what you're super passionate about. Find what actually makes you care about something, and try and do that. Try and apply that to whatever you're doing. Right? For me, it was, okay, I'm going to write a bunch of papers, and they're all going to be about video games. But if it's, say autism for you. Say you care deeply about autism. Find ways to use your communication to help in the fight against autism. Or find ways to, if you care about sports, find ways to do journalism about sports or create your own sports blog or whatever else. But the biggest thing is find that thing you care about and then do that, because that's going to be the most impressive. Number one, coming out of school, you'll have that resume so you can show that off and say, look what I did. I created this. And secondly, you're building skills doing something you love. And so there's no wasted time in that at all. You're going to be enjoying yourself when you're doing what you actually care about.
Jamie?
Yeah, so I think definitely take advantage of all the classes you have here. I think even just 2 or 3 years back, if I look back, I think that what you guys have now is very fortunate. Even the building is amazing, and the professors here, they just know so much. So I think just soak as much as you can from them and take advantage of even classes you're not signed up for. If you're able to attend, I think you should definitely just go and soak it all in. And I think even the other thing is don't stress. That was, I think, a problem a lot of students have. And for me as well, I struggled with that right when I graduated or even during my senior year. I worried and stressed way too much about my future. And I think as long as you do your best and if you take advantage of all the things that USC has to offer, that's really all you can do. And I think with the time that you have left, or if you're not working, just really enjoy life. Go travel, go visit your friends around the world, and really learn about other cultures if you're traveling. I think that's really what I would have told myself back then. And take the study abroad program. It was a great learning experience for me just as an individual, and even it was a great segue for me to transition into post-grad life. So yeah, definitely those three things are my main things.
Fantastic. Ashley?
Being at school is so fun. Like, I don't think you realize how fun and amazing this experience is until you are off. For example, you guys go to football games and have all of those seats like right there. If I wanted to go, it takes me a little while. I have to actually buy expensive tickets. So take advantage of football. Take advantage of all of the opportunities, as you know they've been mentioning as well. I think like a big piece is making sure you get really involved in and out of the classroom. I mean, Annenberg is so well renowned for some of the extracurricular activities that we have. For example, I'm just going to mention one, ATVN. I came back and looked at that newsroom, and that is like a legitimate newsroom. So if you are anywhat interested in writing, producing, or even just checking out how that newsroom works, if you haven't already, I would go over there, talk to some people, or maybe just volunteer an hour of your week just to learn. Because all of these experiences, whether it's ATN, Neon Tommy, are honestly participating in some of the extracurricular activities that other clubs or even other schools, like see what kind of events they have and just go and learn and meet new people. Because you're in a very special environment where everything is so close, where you can walk to a lot of events, you can meet people right down the hall. It's not necessarily like that after school. So whether it's an organized event at Annenberg or Marshall or whatever other school, I would say go. And I would also recommend just meeting a ton of new people and not necessarily stopping yourself from going out because you've got homework. Because I think the best part about college is meeting people, whether that's in school, at events, or honestly, even at a party. So, you know, meet Trojans, because I think after you leave, you know, some of my best connections have been like, oh, you went to USC too? Like, cool. And this is what I did. This is what you did. And that is an amazing, beautiful thing that can unfold, but only if you've made those connections while at school.
Fantastic. Excellent. Well, everyone's done a great job of kind of being respectful of time, and so with that effort, we wanted to be able to turn it over for a few minutes of questions. I think, Kylie, do you have the microphone in the back? So if people would raise their hand and we can go around.
Don't be scared. I won't bite because I'm not there.
No questions for any of the panels? Sure.
Is it on? Ah, perfect. Hi guys, my name is Desiree. I wanted to ask you why you chose Annenberg in the first place. I know, Jordan, you were talking about you're passionate about video games, but why exactly did you guys choose Annenberg? What was your motive behind it?
You want to go?
Yeah, sure. To be very transparent, I did not know what I wanted to do my freshman year. And when I actually came to orientation, I met one of the academic advisors here, and she just sort of laid out what the school was about. And for me, I think a friendly face just really helped me. And the more she talked about, you know, a lot of folks can go into different areas of fields with this, marketing, they can go into psychology, et cetera. So I think because it was such a broad field and I just heard all of the great courses that the school had to offer, I think for me, that's what really leaned me towards it. And I think this school is a very collaborative environment, and when you're working on even things like group projects, I think that it's very unique in a sense compared to the other campuses or schools around here. So really the openness and just broadness and just the great courses they had to offer and the friendly faces was the main thing for me.
Yes, so you want to?
Sure. So I actually came in as a business major. It was freshman year, I was in Marks Hall, and I was walking by a flyer that said ETVN anchor auditions, and I thought, okay, maybe I'll try out. And so I tried out, and I became the weather anchor my freshman semester. And I just like fell in love with the whole thing, the environment, and the advisors. And because of that experience, I actually decided to add on a double major in broadcast journalism. And boy, was I glad I did. I think the best part about having a broadcast journalism degree, at least for me, isn't necessarily that I'm not working in journalism, right? So I'm not using that in particularly for my job. But what I am using is my ability to hopefully tell stories well, to write in a short, concise way, and like when we put together videos and projects, like I can tell the guy like, no, I think the framing is a little off, or like, no, I want it this way, or understand some of those terms. So for me, Annenberg came to me, and I'm really, really glad it did. In fact, right after this, I'll give you a sneak peek. We are filming a collaboration between two artists who are actually using Google Docs in real time to write an entirely new song in one session. So even taking what I've learned in broadcast journalism and bringing it over here in this particular instance is absolutely amazing. So Annenberg came to me.
Awesome. Jordan?
For me, I actually got my undergrad at a different school and came and got my master's here. I started as a biochem double major and said, I don't love that. That's not what I want to do. So I switched to communications because I figured that's broad and I can do a lot with that. But Annenberg specifically, I saw the Master's of Communication Management and I said, hey, that sounds like something that I care about and I can do. So let me try that out. And I ended up loving it and finished the program here.
Hi. You all talked about taking different skills from different Annenberg majors and applying them to companies that don't necessarily suggest themselves naturally from those majors. How much did you find that kind of thing mattered while applying for jobs, with people saying, oh, because I mean, we all see on the career website, people request certain majors, people are looking for certain things and not for other things. Was that ever an obstacle?
I can go first, unless I'm cutting anyone off.
No, go ahead.
So you can see it's like in the corner. I actually had a phenomenal experience with Google. Every other company, honestly, that I applied for. So I was applying more for like sales and business roles while I was a senior. Every other company, while they were okay with it, they always asked, why do you have a broadcast journalism degree on your resume? And I always had to tell them, well, it's because I like storytelling, I've learned how to write, blah, blah, blah. I can talk to anybody to do interviews. And that's going to be a set of skills that's applicable for the sales or whatever role you're hiring for. But I don't know, maybe I'm sure some other companies are like this as well. But when I got down to my Google interview, they never asked me, why do you have a broadcast journalism degree, in a way that I had to defend it. They celebrated the fact that I had a broadcast journalism degree. And said, this is awesome, this is cool, you are different, you have skill sets that perhaps other people applying for these roles don't. So at least in my experience, Annenberg and having that degree really helped me and kind of put that extra star, hopefully, on my resume. So I don't think the other way, because, I think if you find a good role, hopefully they'll be, celebratory of what you have on your resume.
Yeah, so I think the initial attraction in any recruiter really is the skill sets, to be very transparent, just from my experiences. But if you were not to get a certain role just because of lack of, what you've done in the past or prior, so I think that when you're interviewing or when you're communicating, I think if they pick something up, that employer could think of another role for you, or if they have someone else in mind for you to interview with or speak to. I think that, that's really where, from my experiences, it's been, sort of applicable. So to your point, there is a certain extent of where those skill sets are important and necessary. But again, I think a lot of it is really luck, to be very transparent. I think it depends on the type of person you're interviewing for. Because there are some people that really look for that hard skill sets, but then there are those people that think, I think she's a great person. I think she can actually learn how to do these things that they've never done before. So again, I think it's just really dependent on just your circumstances.
I think it depends. If you're looking for more senior roles, they're probably looking for a more specific skill set and a specific person. Honestly, all of you are coming straight out of school. They know, you don't have like 4 years of non-internship experience under your belt. So I think, what you said is definitely more true for this part of your career.
I would say, speaking only to my own experiences, that aptitude matters a lot more than whatever's written down in your resume. If you can go in there and you can interview well and you show them, I know how to do the job or I understand the problem space, that's a big one. If you can communicate how you're going to be effective, then that is what matters rather than degree. At Riot, in my interview process, they asked me about my degree and why they thought it would make me successful, or why I thought it would make me successful. And so I had to do that. And coming in as a systems designer, they're looking for engineers, or they're looking for game designers. They're not looking for somebody who just finished a communications degree. But because I'm able to outline the problem space and say, hey, here's what we need to fix, and here's how, and here's why, they cared a lot more about the answers than they did about whatever piece of paper I had.
And I would just add, from the career development standpoint, this is another part where you all have a role to play with each other as the Trojan family, creating the space. And you've heard everyone talk about the reputational brand of Annenberg. It is one of the ways in which your degree and the experiences that you've had, as someone that has that prior degree or prior experience, creates that space and that expectation. That's oftentimes why employers are interested and willing. And I would suggest in the spring, when you see the companies that come on campus for on-campus Annenberg interviews, they've not only heard that question, but they're very familiar, and that's the reason why they're coming back to look for other students with that same skill set. Any other questions before we close down? Fantastic. Well, getting everyone in the middle of the day is certainly a challenge, taking time away from work. So we really appreciate the panelists coming by today. So if you join me in thanking them and thanking all of you for coming by.